Welcome to this explainer. If you've ever found yourself wondering where exactly state funds go, you might be genuinely surprised to find that a massive chunk of it is actually locked behind bars. Today, we're unpacking the staggering budgets, the heavy legal obligations, and some pretty surprising realities of correctional healthcare right here in Nevada. The way the justice system tangles up with public health is a seriously fascinating web, and well, you are in the perfect place to untangle it with us. To really wrap our heads around the scale of this, we've got to look at a very specific number: $67.7 million. Yeah, you heard that right. That is just the recommended budget for Nevada's prison medical care in fiscal year 2026 alone. Jail and prison healthcare is undeniably one of the absolute most expensive parts of incarceration. We are talking tens of millions of dollars every single year, which makes this a massive public finance issue that actually impacts all of us, whether we realize it or not. So here is our roadmap to follow the money today. First, we'll look at the multi-million-dollar bill. Second, we'll break down exactly why this care costs so much. Third, we'll figure out who actually pays the tab. Fourth, we'll untangle jails versus state prisons. And finally, number 5, we'll look at the public health ripple effect. All right, diving right into Section 1, the multi-million-dollar bill, unpacking the 2025 to 2027 biennium. So where do these massive budget numbers even come from? Well, the governor recommended expenditures are holding incredibly strong at over $67 million for both years of the biennium. State budget documents point to two main culprits driving this. First, projected medical inflation, which, let's be honest, affects healthcare absolutely everywhere. And second, overall inmate population growth. It's basically this constant upward pressure that really shows no signs of slowing down. Now, here is the foundational premise that totally surprised me. The Nevada Department of Corrections has a moral and legal obligation to provide healthcare to incarcerated people. It is a literal constitutional requirement. And we are not just talking about a quick visit to a nurse for a cough. This care covers a massive spectrum: medical, dental, mental health, pharmacy, chronic disease management, and even end-of-life services. Plus, the NDOC notes that a lot of folks enter custody with way higher rates of illness and chronic disease than the general public, so they are starting from a baseline of pretty significant medical need. Which brings us to Section 2, why care costs so much beyond routine checkups. Let's completely bust the myth that this is just about handing out ibuprofen or doing basic physicals. First, like we just touched on, incarcerated populations tend to have much higher unmet health needs the moment they walk through the doors. Second, prisons are constitutionally mandated to provide basic care, meaning they literally cannot legally turn a sick patient away. Third, when a prison facility can't handle a complex medical issue, they have to bring in expensive outside specialty providers, use specialty meds, and organize highly secure transport to civilian hospitals. And fourth, just delivering care inside a secure, lockdown facility naturally requires specialized staffing. All of that drives up costs even before you factor in normal medical inflation. To put those logistics into perspective, wrap your mind around this number: 600. The NDOC system conducts more than 600 patient care contacts every single day across the state. Every major institution has a medical and dental clinic, and some even have their own infirmary capacity. Think about the sheer operational scale of running what are essentially mini hospitals and clinics inside highly secure environments, 365 days a year. Okay, moving right along to Section 3. Who actually pays the mixed funding model? So, who is actually writing the checks? Well, Nevada doesn't rely entirely on general tax dollars. They use a mixed model. On one side, public funding covers the massive core obligation of providing basic care. But on the flip side, there are inmate charges. The system uses internal accounting to post charges for medical, dental, and prosthetic copays. Basically, authorized medical expenses can actually be reimbursed directly from an inmate's trust account. It doesn't magically wipe out the underlying cost of treatment, but it is an attempt to recover at least some of those direct expenses. And that brings us to one of the most heavily debated policies in this whole web: the $8 medical copay. Now, $8 might not sound like a huge deal, but public comment documents point out that this is actually higher than the national average. In fact, that same legislative document notes some states don't charge a medical copay at all. It's important to remember this is just a current snapshot of the policy. These rules can definitely shift, but right now it's a really significant piece of the financial puzzle. The intent behind this fee is pretty practical, right? Discourage unnecessary sick calls and recover a tiny fraction of those overarching costs. But the reality on the ground, a lot of incarcerated people have absolutely zero income. Nevada's inmate banking materials actually show that if an account lacks funds, these charges can just be posted as department charges, which means that modest $8 fee transforms into a continuous, lingering debt that just hangs around simply because the person cannot pay it upfront. Let's untangle things a bit more in Section 4, Jails versus State Prisons, the jurisdictional split. State prisons and county jails are totally different systems. NDOC runs the state prisons, which means those $67 million budgets fall straight onto the state budget. But county jails? Those are managed locally by sheriffs and local governments. Nevada law recognizes that counties may be responsible for certain medical costs for people in local custody, especially for things like pre-existing conditions or injuries. If the medical facility can't collect from the prisoner, the Board of County Commissioners might actually have to foot the bill. So the financial pressure is shared, but the taxpayer burden shifts depending entirely on whose roof the incarcerated person is sitting under. Finally, Section 5, the public health ripple effect, costs beyond the walls. Now, you might be wondering, why should I, as a taxpayer, care about this if I never plan to set foot inside a correctional facility? Well, because Nevada's medical budget is not just some random line item, it is fundamentally an exercise in managing risk. The NDOC Medical Division handles everything from acute injuries to basic preventative services. If this system is underfunded, it directly leads to delayed treatments. And in the medical world, a delayed treatment for a minor issue today almost always turns into a wildly expensive emergency room visit tomorrow. That causes a massive strain on both the facility staff and the state's wallet. And think about what happens when that risk spills out into the community. When a person is released from custody, they very often need immediate, continuous care for chronic conditions, mental health treatments, or just their daily medications. If the healthcare they received inside was inconsistent or underfunded, the costs don't just magically vanish when they walk out the door. Nope, they shift straight to your local community emergency rooms, your local clinics, and your county health systems. This is a huge public safety and public health issue. The correctional health model directly impacts the broader public health network that we all rely on. So I want to leave you with this one thought. When incarceration ends, who pays for the continuity of care? Because if a person leaves the system sicker than when they entered, the financial and societal burden simply transfers right back to the local taxpayer. For anyone following criminal justice, public health, or even just state budgeting, correctional healthcare is literally one of the clearest, most undeniable examples of how the costs of incarceration extend far, far beyond the prison yard. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and we will see you next time.